Hi, I'm Donnie. This is Dwayne, where I love California City, and we're here talking about Measure B. And we have some questions and answers, so let's get into it. I have the
Okay.
questions right here. Our first one is, what is Measure B?
Seems like an appropriate question. So, Measure B is a special tax. Any special tax, any increase in tax, has to be voted on by the public, and it actually has to pass by a two-thirds majority. And that's really, really difficult. You have to really want the tax. It's a special parcel tax, which means it's showing up on your property tax bill. It will tax developed properties, that's anything that has a building on it, at $120 a year. And all of those empty lots out there get taxed at half that, which is $60 a year. The money goes for police and fire department. It's a 55% of it goes for police and 45% goes to the fire department. And it's has a declining scale. So it's on a 6-year term. 6 years from now, we will be most likely facing another question of whether we want to vote for a tax or not, unless things change dramatically. So it'll drop by a sixth every year for 6 years until it's down to nothing.
Okay.
So that's a little different than the last one, which was being replaced as new revenue was coming in. So whether it comes in or not,
It's going to drop no matter what.
it's going to drop no matter what. It's a very simple formula. It's estimated that it should bring in about $3 million, maybe a little bit less. Could be a little bit more if people are paying back taxes, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then it'll drop by $500,000 every year, which means the city's faced with trying to find new
Revenues
to fill
replace
that.
it, yeah.
You would hope it was going up, so we had more money to spend. So it's going to be a difficult 6 years, but it creates some pressure on the government to try to develop other things within our economy that will contribute to the tax base.
It goes to fire and police. It's going to decrease no matter what. It does put pressure on the city to find other revenues to replace it.
Right. And quite frankly, the public needs to put pressure on the city and do what they can to help generate new business, like shop in town.
Right. More money we spend in town,
The more they make, the more taxes they pay.
Yeah. So to continue on, the next question we have here is, what will Measure B do?
It will provide supplemental revenue to the city, estimated at starting at about $3 million. The budget is probably, I think it's 30, maybe 32 million. So that's 10% of the budget. It's not a tremendous amount of money. It will supplement police and fire, and indirectly it supplements the whole budget. But I think that comes up in another question. If not, we'll deal with it later anyways. It's declining every year. So people need to understand that this is not going to improve the city. This is just maintenance. It's a stopgap method or thing to help us survive, not thrive.
Over the next 6 years.
Over the next 6 years. So you can count on not seeing improvements. If you want improvements, then you should have voted for a much, much bigger tax. So that's just, the basic truth. It's just a survival thing to keep police and fire funded. Since it declines every year, it should help the city to focus on generating more revenue by stimulating business, having more homes built, which creates more property tax base. And that, the average home, because people bought them years ago,
Yeah.
is 150, 200,000. Now new homes are selling for 300, 350,000. So if you get a lot of those built, you raise the property tax base. It helps.
Yeah, we expect all of that stuff to be worked on, which we would see improvements, but it wouldn't directly come from this tax. It should be a byproduct of this tax.
Right. And most of it's just going to try and take care of that 500,000 a year that it's dropping and trying to keep it propped up.
Right. That's what the tax will do. What won't the tax do?
I guess I already said it won't create any real improvement. It won't fund everything else except indirectly.
If it's funding police and fire, that means there's other money, general funds that will allow to
Yeah, let's go ahead and get into that
fund those.
and explain how that works. Right, because the city is going to set a budget for the police department and a budget for the fire department, and that money is they're going to pay that unless they just can't, right? But what happens with the tax is it comes and fills that budget. It's not going to fill it all because both of those budgets are more than what's coming in, but it'll supplement those budgets. What that means is that money is not coming out of the general fund, so that money can be used for other things, for Parks and Rec or roads or whatever else the city's doing. If it passes, they're not going to have to cut. Right now, they would have to pretty much cut anything that's not an essential service. We're just bare bones skeleton operating. This will help.
Our next question is, why do we always need a special tax?
That's a good question. Because it seems like nobody else is doing this.
Right, and we're voting on a special tax
And
almost,
we have
almost like every 5 years, almost, it feels like.
right. And for much of the city's history, they have. But the reason is because we don't have a good tax base in other things. If you're Detroit, you have the auto industry there,
Right.
right? And it's filling your tax base. If you're LA, you have the port, you have
Yep.
an oil industry, you have entertainment industry, you have really
A lot of-
well-rounded production industry and things. We don't have any of those. We invited cannabis so we could get something, and that
It hasn't quite paid off.
no, they haven't been able to figure out how to collect that money, and some of them have closed down and left.
Right.
So we just don't have the tax base that other cities have. We're primarily a bedroom community. People live here and they commute to Edwards or to, some all the way down to Palmdale and such to work. So our tax base is our property tax. And we go, okay, great. But the average home price in California is about $900,000 now. Their property taxes are pretty high, right? If you have a $900,000 home, you've got more taxes than I want to pay.
Yeah.
Ours, even a brand new home, is $350,000. So we're like a third of what those other cities are getting in property tax. And we're supposed to run a city, but city jobs and police and fire don't adjust their income based on what the city's producing in taxes.
Right.
Because they're competing. We're competing to hire those people with the other cities. No police officer is going to work here for 1/3 the wage that he would get someplace else. Even if his cost of living is 3 times as much, he's not going to feel that way.
Right.
So we have still a high cost of running government because that cost is set by the competing jobs in other cities. Our property tax is low. What it really should mean to us is we go, if I'm paying 1/3 what I have to for my home, plus all the financing on it, and 1/3 for the insurance for it, right? Because you're not insuring, fire insurance is not insuring a $900,000 home, it's insuring a $300,000 home. And we're paying less taxes. We're saving in several areas. We should feel like, oh, that's pretty easy for us to make up that tax or part of it by voting in a special tax. But nobody likes to vote for taxes. And they think that government should just run without money, but it doesn't work that way. You do expect them to run efficiently.
Yes.
And there's no excuse for wasting money.
But once again, this tax will help kind of create that stability.
It'll create the stability. That's why we keep coming back to a special tax, and that was the question. We just don't have the tax base because of the good thing of our low cost of living.
So, can't the city live within their means, though?
I think the last one kind of answers
Yeah.
that. No, you can't. You're asking them to live at like 1/3 or less because we don't have the industry. Just the property taxes they're getting is like 1/3 what other cities would get, the average city in California.
Yeah.
So
basically, it's our city government has to pay salaries and stuff like that at prevailing wages that other larger cities that have a larger tax base,
we might be able to get them a little cheaper, but not.
but not that much
Right.
cheaper, which does put a strain on things because basically all of our money is going to pay for all these other services and not to improve the city. And that's where this tax is supposed to help offset that, so we have opportunity to find other revenues and stuff to bring into the city to help
Right.
increase that tax base and things.
And if those don't happen, we will be faced with another special
yeah.
tax and get by because we're basically, without industry, we're a property tax funded city.
Our next question, if we don't have Measure B, then will we not have police? Will we not have fire? Will we not have services?
Yeah, a lot of people, because it's the way it's worded, it's to pay for police and fire, kind of is interpreted that, well, if it doesn't happen, then we don't have police and fire. And that's not true. They're considered essential services. They find some way to keep them operating at least at some minimal level because they have to. I think actually state law requires it. And if we can't do that, we just don't have the money, then you basically file bankruptcy and someone else steps in, figures out how to do it and supplements it and whatever. But you have to have those essential services. It doesn't mean that we won't have them. What it means is that we will try to keep the essential services at an essential level, which means you'll cut it down probably significantly. And then things that are considered non-essential services, you'll cut way down or maybe cut out altogether. Those are things like parks and recreation and things. And if you want
other maintenance,
and if you want
the
streets repaired,
yeah.
Well, we just can't because it's not considered as essential as police and fire.
Talking about police and fire being cut to bare essentials, that means we might not have as many policemen.
Oh, we definitely wouldn't. Yeah.
And then that could mean that they just aren't able to respond to everything. But at least they'll be functioning at the bare minimum that we have to for a city.
Right. You'll have them, but, if they get too many calls coming in at the same time and they don't have enough people, then those calls wait.
Our next question. Measure B funds police and fire. What about other services like park?
I think
you kind of talked about it.
The Measure B really brings more money into the finances of the city. Those have to go to police and fire, but if those go to police and fire, then it means that other money that would have had to go to them can now be used for other things. You get the windfall from that.
Mm-hmm. Basically, the tax is going to come in and cover police and fire, which frees up general fund monies and everything to go towards the other departments, parks, maintenance, office workers, and things. We got our last question here. Why are we always funding police and fire with a special tax? Shouldn't it be funded out of the general fund?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a little bit hinted on.
Actually, Ron Smith, Mayor Pro Tem, has brought up several times that police and fire should be out of the general fund, and that making a special tax that's funding police and fire is manipulative to get the voters to come out and vote for it because they feel like it's threatened. And he's absolutely right. It's manipulative. It gets people to vote for it. If you said it was to plant daisies on on the Meridian.
Right. If the tax was going towards like improving the parks or CCB or something like that,
people may not say that's not essential, or improve the golf course. It's not essential, right? So if you say, oh, this is essential services, police and fire, people turn out and vote. And that's it. They should be funded in a way they actually are, because they set the budget. If the taxes weren't there, they would find the money, but they would take the money from someplace else.
Right.
And something that's not essential would go away.
The question is that if we didn't have the Measure B, we wouldn't lose police and fire.
No.
They would be funded, but other services will end up being cut.
I want people to understand there are certain things in the budget that are not funded from the general fund. Your water isn't turned off, and all the guys that work for the water department are probably not going to get laid off. They'll be the biggest department because it comes from your water bill.
Yeah.
The same for the sewer bill pays for water treatment. Right. So there are these enterprise funds that are self-supporting off of fees.
That's the last question. Is there any other remarks or stuff that you want to?
I think it covers. It's not that complicated. It really isn't, and I think we covered it.
And if there are any other questions that people may have, feel free to put them in comments and stuff like that. We'll look at them, and maybe if we have enough, we'll do another video.
Yeah.
But we encourage you to show up July 30th to vote on Measure B.
Thanks for watching.